But being alive and being a woman and being colored is a metaphysical dilemma. I haven't conquered yet. Do you see the point? My spirit is too ancient to understand the separation of soul and gender. My love is too delicate to have it thrown back on my face. My love is too beautiful to have it thrown back on my face. My love is too sanctified to have thrown back on my face. My love is too magic to have thrown back on my face. My love is too Saturday night to have thrown back on my face. My love is too complicated to have thrown back on my face. My love is too music to have thrown back on my face. Listen, this is Ann Marie, host of About This Life. I'm reading for you a choreo poem, one of the poems written by the great Ntozake Shange. And Ricky, you're going to help me with that name because I've practiced it, but sometimes I stumble. She is the writer, the author extraordinaire, the poet, the storyteller for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough.
Yeah.
I have the privilege, the honor of speaking to the director of that poem who have brought it to life today. Her name is Miss Rikki Howie-Lacewell. Hello, Ricky.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing extraordinarily well. I am excited. I'm always excited when the sun comes out because it's been a little overcast and cloudy these last few days. But Ricky, I was reading your bio and I'm thinking director, performer, choreographer, producer, diversity consultant. These are just some of your titles. You have the badge of on 120 shows. Really?
It's probably a little bit more than that, but yeah, yeah.
120 shows. Your personal assistant must have a personal assistant.
No,
Layers.
it's all me.
How do you keep all those stories in your head, all those characters?
I don't. I really don't. The minute the show is over, it is gone.
It
That is
is
something that
gone.
I literally do, and even going doing multiple shows at once. The minute that rehearsal is over, that show is compartmentalized into a section of my brain, and I move on to the next one. So it's it's a feat, but yes, to be able to put something away internally.
It's a feat, and I bow down to you because you know I'm a writer and I always have two or three books in my head, but it's hard to keep all the characters straight. I said, oops, that came from the other character over there. So the fact that you can compartmentalize all of that, it's amazing to me. Let's talk about colored girls.
Yeah.
I had the honor of watching this play, if you would, and I was just mesmerized. As an audience member, as I sat and watched, and I listened to these women talk and share their narrative, share their stories, I went, yeah, that part of it, that's me. I'm sorry, over here, that's me. That's me. What is the reaction of your audience?
Um, a lot of what you just said, but a lot of people came out very moved by just the story, having not seen it. We had a lot of people that came to the show that knew nothing about it, didn't even know what they were walking into, and to walk out with this sense of power that they were able to find within watching the show, just within themselves. So it was a gamut of, I saw people coming out crying, and I'm just like, "Are you okay?" And they were like, "Oh no, it was just beautiful." to I'm crying because it touched me in a way and reminded me of something in myself that I hadn't dealt with. To people that were I think one lady I remember bumping into that was crying, she saw it on Broadway when it premiered. And
Yes.
she said, I've never seen anybody do this justice since then. So yeah, I just enjoyed the variety of people, the ages, the different ethnic backgrounds that came out to see the show, and everyone that loved it. So yeah, I
It's
was
a
I was pleased and shocked, honestly.
it's a beautiful story to tell. And so for our audience, let's talk about what is the show about? Who is Ntozake Shange?
So into Saki, because
And
my assistant director
Ntozake.
into, because it was like into Saki. So I had to learn how to say it like that, into Saki.
Thank you for
It's just
teaching me.
Yep, this amazing poet who would just write about experiences of Black women and all these different experiences that we have and things that we deal with. And it even transcends the parameters that she gave it originally, which was about Black women, to just women in general. And honestly, I think you can even expand it beyond
Mhm.
that to people in general. We all deal with, uh, whether it's rape, whether it's, physical abuse, whether it's emotional abuse. Those are actual feelings that humans deal with on a daily basis. They deal with the love, they deal with the fear, they deal with the success, and they deal with the sorrow. So this particular play talks about that from an African American perspective. And I like that because it gives it that weight, that levity, because also within the African American community, those are things we don't talk about openly. We don't talk about emotions openly within ourselves. Sometimes you can get a group of girlfriends together that can have those conversations. And that is kind of where when I started doing the direction and coming up with an idea of how I wanted to stage it, it really was these group of girls kind of at a slumber party or a get together that were
Mhm.
just starting to tell their stories. Um, and that's kind of where we went. I said that's the baseline of where we're going from. And it doesn't have to be something that the audience 100% gets, but it gives you a connection as an actor to know where these stories are growing from. Because we all know when we go to a sleepover or a girls' night, sometimes we'll say something that we're not going to say in any other area, any other platform.
Correct.
We'll
Yes.
tell our girlfriend something that we won't tell our mom or we won't tell our sister. So I like that it deals with all these very difficult and hard situations, the choices that we have to make when there's a result from a choice that we made. So you have also within the play the abortion monologue. Choice made, another choice made. What are you going to deal with? How are you going to deal with it after the choice is made?
Mhm.
So all of those things. AIDS and any other STD that can come from sexual interactions. So I like that juxtaposition of actors being on stage, not having to portray a character, but to literally just portray an emotion from their perspective. And I let all the girls know we're going to go to the door. We're not going to go through the door. So if there's a piece that is difficult for you, I'm not going to force you to go all the way through that because you'll even notice that even while I was doing the show, not every girl was in every scene and in every.
Yes. Right.
They, when they auditioned for me, I said, what colors do you not want to be involved in? I made them do their research, know what the show is about because it's dealing with a lot of difficult things. And there were some that said, I don't want to be yellow. I don't want to be red. I don't want to be blue. those were things that they didn't want to deal with. So those were things that, from a director standpoint, I didn't force them to deal with those things. We had general conversations as a group, but they weren't involved in those pieces. Just because, as a director, I also want to protect my actors from any type of
Triggering.
harm. Yeah, harm, trigger. And I've kind of always been that way before that became a thing. I'm like, I'm not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. So yeah, that's what I kind of love about this piece, that you just got to see people be people.
People be people. And one of the things it actually feeds into my next question that you may have answered, and that is the topics are so weighty or
Yeah.
so heavy. And how do you balance or juxtapose that with lightness? How do you give those heavy topics air? For me as an audience member, it was the dance, you
Mhm.
know? It was and also the costuming of the clothing that had a very flowy, breezy type of thing. Were those things, well, of course they were intentional, but how did you arrive there?
So when I first started piecing everything together just in my mind, even before auditions, I
Mhm.
wanted there to be, of course, original music. So that's how we worked with the LeVar to get this music going through. And I said, I want the music to be something that kind of elevates the piece from the heaviness that it is. And music tends to lighten the mood
Yes.
sometimes. And there were some pieces where we intentionally went to the dark side with the music, but we might have done something differently on stage to kind of lighten it up. So
Hmm.
the three young ladies that were playing the multi ladies, they were the ones that were learning from all the other older ladies. That was my concept behind it. So they were the ones that would add I guess you could say, the exposition to some of the pieces so that it
Yes.
wasn't necessarily, I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to be angry about this particular piece, or finding ways working with the different actresses to see how
Hmm.
they wanted to tell the story and bring the lightness in. And then working with the costume to say, I want the costumes to be very flowy so that they can dance, they can lounge, they can get down on the floor, they can get up without it being constricting. But I also want them to be color coordinated, but also unified throughout the entire piece. So, and Gino and Mika did a really great job at doing that with the costumes, and then the girls were able to add their own flair that they wanted to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the original work was written way back in the 1970s. At least that's when it was produced.
Yeah.
That was when it came on play. How is this story? And it's a story about emotions because the characters don't have personal names that we're accustomed to. They're named by the color of clothing that they're reading, the girl in red, the girl in green, and so on and so forth. How have you been able to make it relevant to this generation? You mentioned generations earlier, women seeing themselves, and perhaps for the first time, the younger generation is seeing it and they're going, wow.
Yeah. I think it's a piece that just transcends time from when it was actually written. All the things that are dealt with within the piece, the loss, the love, the pain, the dark, the deep dark things, the emotional things that people have to deal with, they don't change from
Mhm.
1974 to now, other than medically we have things that can kind of help us get through some of those things a little bit
Mhm.
better than others, but the emotions that surround all of that still very relevant. Someone that cheats on you, Still very
Very
relevant
relevant.
today. Someone that gives you an STD, still very relevant.
I'm sorry, that was one of my favorites. What are you sorry for?
Yeah, so
Where does your sorry go?
yeah, so it's one of those it's just transcendent. It doesn't matter, like I assume in, you know, 100 more years, this play will still have impactful relevance to women and just people in general. It's one of those, and I am so excited that they allowed me to direct it because it's a show that's not done often, even though now that
Mhm.
I've done it, it's been done twice since then. So it must be on trend this year. But yeah, it's a show I've been trying to do for years, and a lot of theater companies are very scared to say, okay, let's do it, for fear that their audience won't accept it. They were like, oh, yeah, it deals with a lot of hard stuff. Can you change the language? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Nope.
Because you lose the authenticity of it. So why this play, Ricky? Why what is it about this play? And we'll get into some of the other plays you're directing, but why this one? Why did you want to do it for years?
Um, I have loved this play. I read it way back in the day when I was in probably middle school, maybe junior high, but I read it a while ago, and it was just one of those things where I'm like, oh, okay, that's neat.
Yeah.
Poetry. Hadn't seen anything about it, but it was just one of those things that you read, and it just kind of stuck with me. And then getting into theater once I got into college and seeing, you know, Johnson C. Smith at the time, they did a production of it. I didn't get to go see it, but it was something that brought that memory back from reading it when I was in junior high. And then I'm like, okay. And then it's just one of those shows where, especially when they're like, we're looking for a show that's impactful, that shows diversity, that has a Black voice kind of tone to it. And, you know, I always throw out the August Wilson because that's the one that people always, they're like, yes, August
Yeah, we
Wilson.
know him. Yes, we
Yeah.
know him.
Or, you know, you can throw out Raisin in the Sun. Like you have the two authors, Lorraine and August, that they'll put those on just about any time. And I said, I want to throw something in that's a little different, something that isn't a straight play, but it's also not a musical, but something that allows not only myself as a director, but also a music director, a choreographer, and a cast to be collaboratively creative and create something brand new. You're not following a they walk through the door and they go left and they go to someone else's house. This is just poetry, and you can make it whatever you want. And I enjoy that when I direct. And you don't often get an opportunity to be that creative. So I've just always wanted somebody to give me that opportunity. And they were
Here
like,
it
yeah,
is.
they were like, do it. I was like, really? You're going to do it? And they were like, yeah. I was like, let me jump on this before you change your mind.
As we live in a day and age when so much has changed, so much has not. And our voices, people of color, our voices once again are coming under attack.
Mhm.
Why is it important for people who have traditionally been marginalized? Why is it important for our stories to be told? I heard what you said. This is really a story about all of humanity.
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of one can say everybody goes through these litany of emotions. How it is expressed is going to show up differently depending on your identity. So, why is it important that we keep stories like these going?
I think it's important to keep stories like this, especially from marginalized playwrights that highlight marginalized communities, to be done because if you silence the voice, you silence the history and you also silence the experience. Because the experience that we live today is based on past experience. And if the past gets silenced, what foundation do we have? I
Yes.
love it when I'm in a rehearsal room and I can say something like, "Oh my gosh, you remember Milli Vanilli?" And then
Yes.
there are blank stares that goes around the room, and I'm going, "You don't know who that is?" And there I said, "The original Karaoke Boys."
Uh-huh.
And they're
I've
just
never
like,
heard
"Oh,
them call that before,
yeah." And they go,
but
"Oh my
yeah,
gosh, I love
but
karaoke."
they
And
stole
I'm
the
like,
song.
this is kind of the juxtaposition of kind of what popped off from that. But it's just that lack of history, that lack of knowledge of saying, a rotary phone, and people have no concept of what that was.
Or a phone booth, right?
Yeah, and I love it when I see a phone booth. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's my
Yes.
history. Um,
Yes.
so I think it's important for us to continue to have pockets of time where we can just be authentic and have our voices on stage in readings in different ways. And I've always been that one to shake things up, even prior to, and this is going to sound really odd, Black plays becoming not common, but things that, oh yeah,
Mhm.
we must have a Black play in the cycle for this year. um,
Right.
but I was the one that was like, okay, I'm going to do The Wizard of Oz and I'm going to cast it with an all black cast. And they're just like, but you can't do that. I said, I can and I will. And I did. But it was just, I've always been that person that goes against the grain. So
Mhm.
I
Why
love a
drama?
theater. Yeah, I love a theater company that tells me no, because I will bang on their door until they say yes.
Until they say yes. And why drama?
Um,
What? Because that's a storyteller in you.
yeah.
And we tell stories in different ways in our dances, in our music, but why drama?
Um, I think because for me, whether I'm performing in it or whether I'm directing it, it gives me, in a way, protection around, like, there's a script that I'm following, but I still get to branch out from that script and do something a little different. I love when I direct that it's more than what's on the page. So normally the first thing I tell them, we're going to say the words, but all the stage directions, you can just throw that out the window. We're not doing that.
Mm.
If
Hmm.
I wanted to do their show, I would tell them to come back and direct their show. I want to do my show. So we're going to create these characters and make them fully rounded. Because I love it when an audience member goes, I don't know where the character was and the actress was. Like they were one and the same.
Right.
Um, and I love doing that. I always have loved doing that. And there's some actress and that'll go, yeah, Ricky will put you through it, but you're gonna know that character when you're done.
You will, and that reminds me of my fan crush on Mr. Denzel Washington, who's still acting to this day. And he said something similar to what you just did. And he's reached a level of fame that everybody know. Okay, I'm watching Denzel, but when you watch him play a role in a movie, you're just like, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw him when he first started. Didn't even know who he was. It was 1987, 88 on Broadway in a show called Checkmates. He was with
Mhm.
Ruby Dee and Ozzy. It was just the three of them. He was the son. And I still remember, of course, I remember their performances. I still remember his performance, and it was one of his first Broadway shows that he ever did.
Yes.
I'm just like, Wow. And I remember telling my boyfriend at the time, I was like, I think that kid's going to do something great.
Amen. Amen. All he has to do is walk in. It was the walk for me,
Yeah.
especially when he was in uniform.
But yeah, I was just, it was just something. And I think that show was one of those things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I could do that. Even though at the time I didn't think I would end up doing what I'm doing now, but it really stuck with me till this day that yeah, I've seen Denzel. I was close.
Okay, you were close. Almost touched him.
I almost touched him. Didn't even know who he was at the time.
But praise, just want to give shout out to Denzel and Viola for that matter, who's breaking down barriers for us and her husband to
Yep.
be able to create this studio and produce and bring our stories to light. Ricky, over 120 shows. You told me it was something higher than that.
I
So
think it is. I stopped counting at a certain point.
at a certain point, but I'm reading from this list here. Chicken and biscuits, it's my party, seven guitars, once upon the island, what the Constitution means to me, top dog, underdog. Off the list I just read, chicken and biscuits is already
Yeah,
gone. It's
that one
already been
closed.
done. But
Yep.
I need to know what it was about because a title like chicken and biscuits, you know, you can't get more cultural than that.
And yes, very cultural. So Chicken and Biscuits by Douglas Lyons. It's about an African American family. The patriarch, the grandfather, has passed away, and they're coming together to his funeral. And it's what happens at all. I did say that's what happens at all Black funerals. Some
Hmm.
secrets come out that you did not know were going to come out. You have the crazy aunt that shows up that's just a little bit extra over everybody else, doesn't dress appropriately. You have the young uh, niece or the grandchild of the family that's just trying to figure everything out. You have people that are dealing with their own identities or their own acceptances. And I just love it because it's a comedy with slices of drama in it of just this wonderful group of 8 people that just come together to just have probably the best going home celebration, and they find themselves and they find acceptance within the family, within that celebration. The matriarch of the family realizes that she has to accept her son who's gay, and
Hmm.
that's just a whole weave
Yes.
going through the whole thing. We have the daughter, the oldest daughter, who is not sure if the family likes her or not. She can't keep a man, so she feels less than. And so she has to finally accept herself, because it kind of goes back to how you going to love somebody else if you don't love
To
yourself
love
type
yourself.
thing. So she kind of learns that lesson. And then you have Beverly, who is the sister of the matriarch, who is the hairdresser from Atlanta that is more street than not.
Hmm.
And she's trying to find a man at the funeral. That's her whole.
Okay.
Um, she has baby daddy issues, and her uh, daughter is wanting to be a rapper. So it's everything. And then
It's hilarious. It's
yeah,
drama.
it's hilarious. It's drama. One of the things that when I did that show, because it can go, as I've said, it could go very Tyler Perry and almost
Hmm.
be a spoof or a caricature of African Americans. And I said, I want us to get close to that, but I don't want us to go over the line. I want people to really find these real and true identities of these characters. And yeah, we actually we succeeded. We did that, but it was a very fun show to do. Very
It
funny.
sounds like it was fun. And it's so interesting because some of the topics, for example, someone who's gay, it's something that in our community for years and generations, it's hush hush.
Hmm.
And, in a situation, I think of my own children and the communities that they walk through and how the perspective is so much different than how I was raised.
Yep.
And we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so these shows give the opportunity to see somebody's identity from a different perspective, you
Yeah.
know?
Because
So,
he was one of the things in Chicken and Biscuits. One of my favorite phrases is Kenny, who is the one that is of the LGBTQ community. He says, "How can you find yourself when you're trying to hide yourself?"
wow.
And
Wow.
it was just this whole thing of how he had to hide who he was in the household he grew up in because he was told that it was consistently a sin. But now that he's out of the household, he's okay to live his life. But now that this family is getting back together at this funeral, he's struggling with, do I need to hide? Because he's also bringing his partner.
Right, right.
And his partner also is not African American. So that's another twist that comes into it. So it
Hmm.
it was really
Sounds like
just,
my family, Ricky.
yeah. Yeah. So it was really just a beautiful amalgamation of just our lives just on stage, and everyone could kind of relate to it in a different way and learn. I A lot of people laughed, a lot of people cried. Yeah, another show where I made people cry. I keep doing
Mm. We
that.
cry because we become emotional.
Yeah.
And we cry because it is the essence of our spirit that is bubbling up to the surface. And we pretend and we wear masks and we put on personas because we have to. We learned how to survive and we're very good at it. But when we see ourselves, there is a validation and an affirmation that drama that shows give us. And it's the ability to see ourselves and have it to be okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that. I like that.
yes, absolutely. So it's always emotional. So you have several plays coming up in the next several months. Is it all in the DMV area or is it
Yep, nope,
different
it's
places?
all in the DMV. I have Clyde's, which is a group of
Hmm.
ex-convicts that get to work at a sandwich shop. And it's about them rebuilding their lives one sandwich at a time. And each sandwich kind of represents just all the layers of their life. So they're reconciling what caused them to go into the prison system and how they're going to rebuild their lives on the way out. So it's a funny, heartwarming
Hmm.
story. And of course, it is Len Nottage, another African American playwright, who writes a lot of real life stories of our community. So I'm doing that in Frederick and also in Baltimore. So back to back Clydes that somehow happened. Um, then, yeah, so that's Clyde's. And then after that is It's My Party, which
Hmm.
is women's suffrage.
Hmm.
Um, and I just finished casting that. And even though the only person of color historically is Ida B. Wells Barnett, I was able to multiculturally cast that show. So it
Absolute.
is
Shonda Rhimes. Do I hear some Shonda Rhimes?
possibly, but yeah, so working
A
with the
different
playwright.
version of that. I'm actually pleased to say that with Pipeline, they had a cold read of Wednesdays in Mississippi.
Oh,
And I was so excited to do the cold read. You know, I'm not an actress, but to be able to be part of that project and understand that story that I never knew in terms
Yeah,
of the women and what they did and our allies in the southern part of our country. And I'm like, yes, these are the stories that
yeah.
need to come alive. Yeah.
And that's why I love doing those. And then Once on This Island, Caribbean folklore, Romeo and Juliet from a Caribbean perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but more in terms of the classism within the Caribbean race.
Yes,
Um,
we
the
have a
light,
lot of those.
yep, the lights against the darks. So that
Yes,
is coming up. So yeah, I seem to be doing a lot. Then followed by What the Constitution Means to Me, which very educational play that is kind of out there. However, it my goal is to have, because it's about a debate over the 14th Amendment and what it actually means to them. And the the debater is a grown adult debating a teen child. And I'm hoping that the teen child can be African American so that you get two completely different perspectives of the 14th Amendment, especially nowadays with so many things being
yes,
voiced and stopped and triggered all over the place. I think that should be a good debate.
yes, yes. And that's something that our children need to take a hold of.
Yeah.
How do people, and we're about to wrap up in a moment, how do people find these stories? I mean, even before they get to you and you're presenting it to us, there's just like a generation of people who never heard of the colored girls. There's a generation of people who don't know who Lynn Nataja is,
Yeah.
if I'm saying the name correctly, um, and don't know that they don't know. So if you're going to find stories, where do we say, well, you need to look into this?
Um, that for me, how I find them, I am the first person, like I go on all the different rights houses websites and I look for the shows that aren't done, or I'll even call them and say, what shows do you have that are not being produced? I love to do the shows that aren't
Mhm.
being produced. Or I'll do a Google search just for any new African American playwrights. And I'll start following them and watch how they're doing readings of something new that's coming up, like Brandon Jacob Jenkins is another playwright that I'm
Mhm.
starting to fall in love with. He just keeps writing new ones. It's like popcorn. Every time I turn around, there's a new one from him. I was like, Brandon, but you
Yeah.
just had one on Broadway last week, and now you have a new one. So he's really cranking out all these different plays about marginalized communities and especially African American communities. And I'm also part of a Facebook group that a lot of playwrights are in. And I just kind of sometimes go down a rabbit hole and something
Mm-hmm.
will stick out to
Mm-hmm.
me and I'll order the script and I'll read it and then it just depends on the mood. I just start putting them in because I just submitted 4 shows to another theater company, 2 that they know of and 2 that they don't know of. I was like, let's see which one they pick.
Let's see which one they pick.
Yeah.
So I have a call to action.
Okay.
Okay, I'm giving you a call to action, and that is our children in schools. They need to come see these plays.
They do.
They they need to. I can say, for example, that oftentimes educators will receive the pamphlets and the booklets of the plays. And there's always going to be one, for example, on Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I guarantee you every single year, and so on and so forth. But there's no one knows that these plays are out there. And so I think we need to um, do that call to action, certainly, and promote and encourage people. We need to get the kids. We need to get the kids,
Yeah, I have
get the
tried that with
stories.
several different theater companies. The harder part is getting the schools to even,
Consider.
yes. I was like, how can I say that? Now, to even consider it, because even when I did Mountaintop, I was like, it's during Black History Month. You always want them to come see something. We were giving away free tickets to come see the show. And they were just like, yeah, no, we can't sponsor that. And I was
Yeah,
like, you're not sponsoring anything that's free. You're just informing them that it is available. And we literally could not even get the fact that it was free into the hands of the kids or the parents.
understood, understood,
I mean, but
understood.
I always try. I always try. Every single theater company that I work with, I go, why don't we get, even the students to help us build or help us
Hmm.
advertise, or because I'm of the older generation. As I say, I'm of the exiting generation, and I'm trying to build up the entering generation. And it is very hard pressed to even find the entering generation. And people are like, well, you should teach. I was like, that's a completely
No,
different mindset for me. And I
it's a different mindset.
I said I did it back in 1988, didn't like it then. I'm gonna let that go.
Yes, it's it's a completely different mindset, and I'm just the wheels are turning in my mind, in terms of how do we get young people just to tap in, because these are their stories, and I think about people who struggle with their identity, and they struggle as they're learning about themselves. And society is telling them that they're a nobody. And I'm just like, I need for you to understand that you are.
Yeah.
So, but Miss Rikki Howie Lacewell, thank you so much for being my guest today.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is Ann Marie, host of About This Life. I would love, love, love for our audience to go ahead, not only just listen, but to subscribe and to share to your community, to your circle of friends. Would love to see you there. Take care, everybody.
All right.